Welcome back to All Rise, and this is our part 2 of a we don't know how many part series where we're answering questions that viewers sent in to us. And if you didn't see a Q&A episode just like this already, go back and watch the one from 2 weeks ago for the first few questions we answered, and then stick around and we're going to get to more right now. Okay, so our next question, you mentioned Zoroastrianism when you were talking about Islam just then. It was in one of your
I was quoting something, you mentioned it.
Yeah. And we got a question on that from friend of the show, Greg Stewart, who asks, how would you respond to secular allegations that Abrahamic faiths, including Christianity, came from or were at least heavily influenced by Zoroastrian theology? I've heard the claim that Judaism and later Christianity borrowed from Zoroastrianism intentionally or unintentionally, and I feel you would both do great at addressing this. I just want to include that last part.
Yeah, yeah, we both would do great. Well, you would do great at it, actually, too. I know something about Zoroastrianism, but you wrote an article about this.
Not only would I, but I did do great. I hope. But there is on our website, and I'll link it in the show notes, I did write an article, Was Jesus Just a Zoroastrian Knockoff? Mm-hmm. And it's not just talking about is Jesus a copycat, but I go back and look at even the claims that the Old Testament itself is a copycat.
Right.
And so we go through a lot of that. We'll go through some of that here, but there's a lot more detail in the article and a lot of other great sources for you to check out in the notes there. But first, for those who don't know, I just thought, why don't we describe what is Zoroastrianism? Yeah. It's not something that L. Ron Hubbard created, even though it sounds like sci-fi Hollywood weirdo writing stuff.
Right.
But it is
a cool name for a religion.
It's a cool name for a religion. The prophet is named Zoroaster, which is pretty
sounds like a Marvel character.
Pretty boss to me. Yeah, I love
pretty
that.
Cool.
Actually, I want to be called that from now on.
Zoroaster.
Zach, you have to affirm me, or I'm going to cancel you. Okay. Anyway, what was Zoroaster saying? Oh yes, Zoroastrianism, considered one of the oldest monotheistic, that may not be entirely true, that's in the article, religions, although there's reasons that people want to call it monotheistic, so that you can base every monotheistic religion off of it. But
it's got an agenda.
Yeah, so it's dated to about the 6th or 7th century BC, or earlier in ancient Persia, which would be modern-day Iran, parts of Central Asia. It was founded by the prophet. Some say Zoroaster. Another way the name is said is or is spoken of is Zarathustra.
It's like thus spake Zarathustra.
Yeah. For the Nietzsche fans and classical music fans, there's all sorts of stuff there. But he taught devotion to Ormazd, who was the supreme and all-good god, in contradistinction to and opposition to Ahriman, who is the spirit of evil and chaos. This religion still exists today. There's probably, I looked it up, there's probably less than 200,000 adherents.
One of which
is
the famous Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
Whose real name was Farouk, by the way. And the lead singer of Queen, by the way, and his entire family, of course, is Zoroastrian as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the movie. I loved the movie, by the way. I thought
Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yeah, that was such a great.
It was good.
Such a great movie. You can't help it, seemed like a sweet guy. But and what a voice. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Surrounded by tragedy, unfortunately, at the end.
Yeah. But in actuality, the Zoroastrianism was monotheistic and dualistic. And I mentioned before, you'll read in the article, the term monotheism is actually contested in reference to Zoroaster. But if you look it up online on the popular websites, it'll say, the earliest or one of the earliest monotheistic religions. And the dualism in Zoroastrianism is heavily impacted by human involvement, to the point where for the good power to defeat the evil power, humans have to help.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that humans have to help. But in salvation, which we'll get to a little bit, divine powers cannot help. It's completely works-based. So it's a very human-centric, look at how great we are and how important we are type of
And that'll be
thing.
important in a minute, I think, when we talk about some of the differences here. But
But
so dualism, just quick, describe it in a minute here. Just give it, what do you mean by dualistic?
Oh, yeah. So dualistic is typically there are these types of religious worldviews where, well, first, if you think of the Bible, it is God who creates all things, and then there are beings under him. There's angels, there's humans, there's dogs, but everything is under him, and some of those become evil, but there's never any question about who's in power here, what's going to happen in the end. Dualism is more, sometimes there's this battle, it's close. Sometimes it's needed, that you need to have evil for a balance. There needs to be a balance between good and evil. There needs to be harmony between the two.
Right.
Whereas in let's call it Judeo-Christian, the Judeo-Christian worldview, there's not that sense. So there's a sense that
Judeo-Christian is something different.
Judeo-Christian.
That's a martial arts form,
and sometimes God uses judo. He uses the evil of someone to flip them into goodness. But
that's Judeo-Christian.
See Paul.
Yeah.
That is Judeo-Christianity. Judo chop. But the point is, there's never any question. Evil isn't supposed to be here. It's like we talked about in the first question. It's alien. It's parasitic, and it will one day be removed. In the others, there's, depending on the one, it's a question of who's going to win in the end. How's the restoration going to come? Or we actually need these two to exist together.
Right.
Yeah. But these powers are in a battle, whereas the battle between God and Satan.
So you're already seeing a stunning lack of parallel.
Right.
And we'll get to that in a second. But there's this sense in which, Greg's question talks about this, at least implies the whole, history of religion school, where all religious belief, none of it has to be necessarily true or false. Most of it's false, or all of it is false, but it's all evolutionary.
Yeah.
It builds on itself. And so we come to a position now where we're the enlightened ones, where we can look back on religion and see how evolutionary it was. Is that Christianity borrowed from something else, that thing borrowed from something before that, contemporaneously with it, and there's an amalgamation. So you go from like a rudimentary polytheistic view of the world, where there are gods of thunder and gods of tornadoes and gods of sandstorms and gods of rivers and streams, and then you consolidate them all into a little more of a theologically and philosophically sophisticated version of religion, but that still borrows from other things as well. That's what I'm talking about here.
And the pinnacle is always me.
Yeah.
I am the end. It's sort of someone offered Jesus to stand at the pinnacle of something one time. I forget who that was.
Whoa.
But the point is, look at me. I'm the enlightened end result of all these years of good. Finally, all bad things have been taken away.
We have a bit of a chronological snobbery. As someone
it's a very European, which is where this history of religion school come from. Very European. Look at us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We made it.
And so they find these parallels, like, and we've done episodes that have done this before about parallels between Jesus and ancient mystery religions like the Mithra cult or Osiris and all this, like things like Mithra was born of a virgin and had 12 disciples. First of all, there's nothing written about these 12 disciples. I think we were talking earlier, there's an image of Mithra surrounded by the zodiac, which is 12.
Yeah.
But the number 12 doesn't have a magical parallel thing going on.
Which post-dates Christianity.
Right. So if there's any influence, it's Christianity influencing that, not the other way around. Right. And this idea that Mithra was born of a virgin is the legend that he was born out of a rock. That is, sex was not involved. That rocks don't have sex, but no one really called that a virgin birth. That is a stretch of the word virgin by quite a bit.
Squint really hard, and you can maybe
exactly. And Osiris, the idea that Osiris sacrificed himself, dies, and then is resurrected as king. He doesn't sacrifice himself. That's the first thing, and the second thing is he doesn't rise from the dead. He becomes the god of the dead. He becomes the god of the underworld. It's a miserable existence. It's nothing like the resurrection in any way, shape, or form. So the parallels are only alleged. No matter how many times you watch the Zeitgeist movie, the parallels are just not there.
Yeah.
They're just not. And if there are any parallels, the written forms of those parallels post-date Christianity, which suggests that Christianity was the influence, not the influenced one. But even if you found parallels, and we've discussed this before, even if you found parallels, my response to that is, and so what?
Yeah.
You have creepy, weird parallels between the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and of John F. Kennedy. Decades and decades and decades apart, about 100 years apart from each other. And does that mean that one is fake and the other one is real, or that both were fake? No, we trust the history behind these two things, even though there were these crazy, weird parallels and inversions of facts.
Well, if you're in the same culture too, and you're like, oh, look, they say the word harvest and they say the word harvest. Well, they're in an agrarian culture.
Really.
Harvest meant a lot. They're not going to make up, they're not like Gen Z. They're not always making up new words.
Yeah, Gen Alpha apparently.
Gen Alpha is,
They're the
okay,
ones
I don't even know.
the brain rot.
I don't know.
Zach
is one of these. I don't know which one he is.
No, he's Gen Z still. He hasn't.
Well, it's infuriating talking to him nonetheless. So
poor guy.
Anyway, where were we?
Yeah.
But those parallels sometimes are not. I mean, it's just because you have the same idioms. You have the same ways, the illustrations. You're pulling from the same cultural look at what's around you way of describing things and relating things.
But the substance of what the claim actually is, that's what matters.
Right.
Is there a substantive parallel? The answer is no. There might be a rhetorical or verbal usage of the same words, but it doesn't matter. But even when there are uncanny parallels, there's still a so what factor. So if I were to describe this event, the largest passenger ship ever constructed, is about to leave England for New York in April, and go across icy waters. And the captain wants to break the record for how fast he can get across the Atlantic, even knowing that it might mess up the schedules of those people who are going to be received at the other end of the voyage. It's going to take on this large vessel, across the North Atlantic, despite the icebergs in April. And by the way, the ship has too few lifeboats. There's not enough lifeboats for roughly half of the people, so that if a disaster does happen, they'll die. Well, a disaster does happen. They smash into an iceberg, and the ship sinks. And because of the lack of lifeboats, half the people die.
Yeah.
One would think that I'm talking about the Titanic, a real fact of history. What I am talking about actually is the fictional wreck of the Titan, which was a fictional book, a fictional ship written in a fictional story called Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, which was written years before the Titanic.
Yeah, we're talking, it was first published 1898.
Right.
The Titanic sunk in 1912.
Right, so we're talking a 14-year time gap here. And just because the parallels are spooky doesn't mean the Titanic didn't actually sink.
Yeah.
So when you find these parallels, the response should be, that's mildly interesting, maybe a little creepy, but it doesn't prove one thing or the other true or false. Right. So this parallelism is overblown. And so even if we did have parallelism between Zoroastrianism and Christianity, and we don't, and any parallels would be the opposite, maybe informed by Christianity, not influencing Christianity in the result in the reverse. The answer is so what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with that, let's get to some of the specifics too. So we're not just making sort of vague generalizations. Those generalizations are based on studying, for me and you, essentially every instance we can find of some parallel. We look into it, and that's sort of our findings on it. But specifically, looking at the charge, there's a historian named Edwin Yamauchi, who studied Zoroastrianism. He's a polyglot. He studies Persian religions, the sort of world of the Bible. And he said that in order to even establish Zoroastrian influence on the Old Testament and on Hebrew religion, you'd have to assume four things. The chronological priority of Iranian beliefs, late dates for the Old Testament texts, a close parallelism between the beliefs, and reasons for independence. And he found that none of those stood up to, like 0 out of 4, stood up to the scrutiny of the things that would be needed to prove this. And so
you can't prove it one way or the other.
you can't prove it one
There's
way.
no evidence for it at all.
Right.
Yeah.
There is 0 evidence when you look at the actual text, which is the scholarly consensus. But let's, one of we already kind of alluded to it, but you can say a little bit more if you like. The dualism, the idea of Satan in the Old Testament and the devil figure of Ahriman in Zoroastrianism. This is often brought up as, look at this. They got this from Zoroastrianism, this idea of the devil.
Yeah.
What do we really find?
Well, the first thing I think of, by the way, is that are we really going to argue that because human beings have a concept that there are good and evil beings, suddenly every religion is some a derivation of each other? It's like we know
that
this.
for me.
We just know this from our everyday experience. So that's a little bit silly to make that the claim of a parallel.
Appreciate your restraint.
Yeah, I was trying hard.
Silly. Yes, good.
But this idea of dualism, this is foreign to the biblical text. It's foreign to the way ancient Hebrews thought about God and Satan. You do get the Satan emerges from the first book of the Bible, from Genesis, but also, of course, in Job, we see him interacting, and he's only given permission by God to do anything. So he's not even a powerful being in and of himself. He's given permission by God to mess with Job, and even commanded, but you can't go any further than this. And Satan can't say, you'll just wait and see. I'll go farther than you've ever told me. He doesn't do that. He's got to obey God's commands. He's got to. So this dualism thing is just foreign to the text, completely foreign. But one of the things that's really foreign to the entirety of the corpus of Scripture from Old to New Testament is that the Old and New Testament's arc is that human beings have fallen, and therefore, because of their fallen nature, can't fix themselves.
Right.
We can't fix ourselves. We are helpless, in a sense, because of our sin nature, to actually save ourselves. So we need a Savior who's not us to save us from us. Old Testament, that's Messiah. New Testament, that Messiah is fulfilled. It's in Jesus, who is God made flesh, who comes and pays a penalty that we deserve to pay so that we don't pay it, so that we can be saved from our sin. So we have, other than being grateful and accepting the free offer of grace, we have our good works don't effectuate our salvation. And God doesn't need our help. That's for sure. And this is such a contradiction with the Zoroastrian belief that not only in Zoroastrianism, can we fix ourselves, but the divine power doesn't even interfere in any way and can't.
We have to fix ourselves.
Yeah, we have to. It is.
We also have to help him
Right. Exactly.
win the war at the end.
It's to say that they're parallel isn't even wrong. I'm not even sure what the word actually is to describe that. It's not right. That's not wrong. It's
not even wrong.
It's not even wrong. Yes, that's how bad it is.
Yeah, and by the way, that comes from, this isn't, again, you did it with the Islamic voices. That comes from Mary Boyce talks about that. Who was one of the preeminent scholars on Zoroastrianism, not uncontested, but preeminent. And she wrote, there could be no intervention, whether compassionate or capricious, by an omnipotent being to alter their consequences. This is so, like he's diametrically opposed to where God is constantly pursuing us and trying to help us. We need the help, and we keep resisting it, and he is constantly trying to pursue us to help us because we need his help.
Whether that's Old or New Testament.
So that's like, it's so different. There is no parallel. Another one that comes up a lot, we talked about Satan there and salvation, is resurrection is one of the big ones, because you have to attack the big ones, right? And so if we look at the idea of the resurrection through the priority, the criteria that Yamauchi talked about, this priority of Iranian beliefs, you see how wrong-headed even the issue of resurrection is. So first, the resurrection is not even mentioned most likely, in the oldest and most trustworthy Zoroastrian texts, the Gathas. So there's no mention of it. There seems to be no understanding of it.
Yeah.
The earliest attestation is probably from around the 4th century BC, which is 200 years later, 200 years after national resurrection is already talked about in the book of Ezekiel.
Yeah.
Which is dated to, around 586,
Right.
somewhere,
Yeah.
on the other side of that date with
Right.
the Babylonian captivity.
Definitely way before.
Yeah. So that's 200 years. The parallel between them, Yamauchi points out that the parallels are not all that parallel. The Jewish dead are buried and rise from the dust of the earth. The Persian dead are left out exposed and must be recreated from the elements. Now, what's something Jewish people could not allow? That's the leaving out and exposing of dead bodies. They had laws against it. It's one of the reasons why the Roman crucifixion of Jews, like Jesus, was so terrible to them, because their bodies were left out, thrown in a pit to be picked apart by scavengers.
Right.
This was beyond disrespectful.
It's also why the account of the crucifixion has the Jewish leaders asking Pilate to have the legs broken of Jesus and the two thieves, so that they wouldn't stay out during the Passover.
Right. Yeah.
So this is very different than Zoroastrianism.
Yeah. And so here's the major problem that we run into with Iranian priority, where most of our understanding of some of this stuff comes from, of the eschatological beliefs, of the salvific beliefs, even of ideas of resurrection, where those come from, are from texts that are allegedly much older, but our earliest copies of them are from the 9th century. These are the Pahlavi texts.
Yes. A.D.
A.D., sorry, the 9th century A.D. And we don't know what they looked like in the 4th century B.C. or earlier. And so even though those texts that are like, oh, look, those are 200 years after Ezekiel, well, that's when they're dated.
Yeah.
But we don't have the physical texts that are even to. So really, the distance between Old Testament is 586 BC to the 9th century AD, and we don't know what Zoroastrianism believed, what believed in between those times,
Right.
Because we don't have the textual history. That holy book has a history, and it's severely lacking.
Yeah.
And furthermore, as Bart Ehrman pointed out, so Bart Ehrman, we're typically disagreeing with Bart Ehrman.
Yeah.
But he pointed out something, because he actually answered this question on his blog, and he says there's really no reason to think that there is some parallel between them or some influence.
Right.
And he said that when you get a more detailed discussion of resurrection in Israel, it's during the Maccabean period, which is during the Second Temple period, in between, there's this. They weren't really years of silence, but sort of in between
Malachi and Matthew.
The Malachi and Matthew, the Old Testament and New Testament. Yeah,
sort of.
So it's during the Maccabean period. He says a full century and a half after Israel was controlled by Persians. So the resurrection, they start talking a lot more about resurrection a century and a half after Persians were in control of them. But when it comes up, they are surround the influence at the time, and who's ruling them at the time are the Greeks who hate resurrection, and it's the dumbest thing they've ever heard of.
It's folly to the
It's
Greeks.
folly to the Greeks. So it's strange for them to suddenly, if they're just influenced, we just like accepting all influences around us. Let's wait 150 years until people around us who want to kill us already hate the idea of resurrection. Now let's make it a big thing,
Right.
And let's go to war over it.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't make any sense. And this led one of the leading experts in Zoroastrianism and Eastern religions in general, R.C. Zahner, to basically say that no certainty can be gleaned into the issue, really. Did Judaism borrow from Zoroastrianism? Zoroastrianism from Judaism? Did neither borrow? You just can't have any certainty of it because you simply don't have the data.
Yeah.
You have zero evidence. You have nothing to base it on.
Yeah.
Other than
It sort of reminds me of
Text
the
that are
idea
made.
that it sort of reminds me of the idea that you can have a claim that, I don't know, the position of the moon influences whether or not people will eat vanilla ice cream at a certain time of the day. Maybe, but there's this zero to link them.
Right.
And they seem so unlinked, other than they're both Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
Zoroastrianism and Judaism and Christianity, it just seems like a far link. You'd have a better case for saying that the pyramids of Central America and South America are linked to the pyramids of Egypt in some way. But even then, most of it is just, it's a good design, and human beings make designs that are similar to each other. And so what? Hey, I hope you're enjoying the show. And before we go any further, I just want to say this. If you're watching this and enjoying the conversation, we'd love for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss future episodes. Now, believe it or not, about 90% of the people who watch our videos aren't subscribed. And if just a fraction of you hit that button, it would make a huge impact for us. It's one simple, totally free way to support our ministry and help others discover thoughtful Christian content in a culture full of conflict, one that's searching for meaning. So go ahead, subscribe, like, and share. It really does help us out. And now, back to the content.
Yeah. So to sort of wrap this up, one of the leading scholars, one of the leading scholars of ancient Judaism, Jacob Neusner, pointed out that, you wouldn't come away from the writings of the rabbis and thinking that, they must have been influenced by Persian texts and by Zoroastrianism. He actually said, examining what the Talmudic rabbis actually knew about Iranian culture, we can hardly be impressed by their depth of knowledge. So it's either an ignorance, or what they do know is not great, but it's clear that, the culture is clearly mixed, but the understanding of this religion did not seem to mix, or they didn't care about it, or whatever. It just had not been a major concern of theirs.
And you can't deliberately imitate what you don't even know.
Right. But I think, the so-called the dean of the world's Iranologists, Richard Fry, essentially said that, he was once talking about the severe lack of Zoroastrian resources. And he said that trying to reconstruct Zoroastrian beliefs from them, from the available sources, would be like trying to reconstruct Judaism if you only had the Psalms, fragments of the Talmud, and even later writings.
Oh, wow.
So you have a book of worship and poems, then later people from their context commenting on some of that stuff, and then even later writings than that. So what can you construct about it? Because, we were kind of talking, you might get a picture from that where, let's say you just got a snapshot of, 1,000 years after ancient Judaism. Let's say it's the year 1080. You get a snapshot. You might say, some religions, worship in temples, but the Jews, Judaism does not worship in temples.
Right.
It's like, well, they had a temple. They don't have it right now. You don't know that because 1,000 years ago it was destroyed. But they used to have it. Now you would get it from some of the sources that there was some sort of temple thing or whatever. But the point is, and also Judaism had developed in ways that was specifically countering Christianity.
Yeah.
And so there are things that you would clearly miss about ancient Judaism because you were only getting information from commentators much, much, much after the point, in different contexts,
Right.
A completely different world.
Oh, yeah.
And that changes it. So it's hard.
Yeah. Bottom line is from what we do have, there's no parallels, and from what we don't have, we can't tell anything anyway.
Right. Yeah.
That's basically the answer.
Stop worrying about it.
Yeah.
And
Hopefully that helps you, Greg.
yeah. All right. Our next question was from Valeria A. Kali 7959, and they ask, it would be interesting to hear you talk to a Jewish convert to Christianity. I wonder if you've come across missionaries to lesser reached Muslim people in the southwest of Russia. How do we share Jesus in those areas? Based on your experience in college campuses and parenting older children, what can a parent do to prepare a child to go out into the world and keep practicing their faith? So there's a couple questions there.
Yeah.
But we've got very good news about the first one.
Yeah, the first one about the Orthodox Jew is that we actually had a conversation with an Orthodox Jew, former Orthodox Jew. He's a Jew who has found that his Messiah is in fact Jesus. We had a great episode, a great conversation with David Shapiro. So I do commend for your watching that episode. It's a lengthy one. We have a great, wide-ranging conversation. So yeah, please do watch that one. It was a very fun conversation.
Yeah. And on that point, though, and maybe something that this person is getting at is because you kind of see when you're talking about sort of people in the West, your typical college student, the idea is you have to change their mind. You can convince them by changing their mind, showing them a better, better facts, whatever. But when you're talking about Judaism and when you're talking about Islam, people tend to inherently understand it's a little different. There's a culture that comes with it. There is a family, there's a whole social world that comes with it, that it's not just, you can't just change your mind about it. You're wrecking your life if you do it. So one of the biggest issues for Jewish converts would, just like with Muslim converts, would be the social stigma.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you help someone like that, and even from your own experience, which took 9 years, as you've mentioned before, what does it take, and how do you help someone with that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. The first thing is that to unpack this idea of what the cultural stigma actually is. So Islam, as a good example of it, Islam brings with itself a culture, an overlay culture, but it also operates within the underlay cultures of the various ethnicities that it is extant in. So you have it in Africa, you have it in the Middle East, you have it in South Asia, you have it in Southeast Asia, you have it in the United States, and you have it, of course, in Europe as well. So on every continent where humans are living, Australia included, there are Muslims and a substantial Muslim population, and those populations have different underlying substrata cultures that are either honor-shame cultures or authority culture, or even innocent guilt cultures like the West. But Islam overlays on top of that a sense of religious identity, which brings with it more of an honor and shame culture. An honor and shame culture is simply a culture that enforces morality through collectivism. So you do that which is honorable for yourself, which translates to your family, which translates to the community, which translates to the nation, which translates to the religion. So you're trying to do that which is honorable, but you're also trying to avoid that which brings shame, because it changes who you are. You don't do something bad; you have become someone shameful. So it's almost like a character transformation in that sense. If you do something, one of the worst things you can do is change your religion, because it is a moral good that you honor your parents and you honor your parents' parents and these kind of things in terms of their religious identity, because religious identity means so much. That's true of Judaism as well, where it might not be even a religious identity. You hear David Shapiro talk about it on our episode. It's not necessarily just the religious identity in terms of I do these things. It's that I am this thing, and my parents were, and this is the community we belong to, and it's a community that's gone through quite a bit, and so there's this insular community. And if you leave Judaism, which doesn't always necessarily mean I practice kosher, I observe the high holy days, none of that, because I know plenty of people who are they're Buddhist, and they still are accepted within the pale of Judaism, because then they haven't stopped being Jewish in some sense.
Right.
The way you stop being Jewish is to become a Christian. I know atheist Jews who have zero problem calling themselves Jews, and other Jews calling them Jews, even though they don't believe in God at all. But if you're a Christian, you're suddenly not Jewish anymore.
Yeah.
So there's an identity that you lose in this. That's why it's so tough. How we can help people with this is, one, to expose that as the main reason why they have objections in the first place. Yes, we have intellectual objections. Yes, we can have, was the Bible changed? Is Jesus really the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy? Is he the Messiah? Did he rise from the dead? We can have all these kind of conversations. But ultimately, there is a fundamental barrier to the answer if the answer is uncomfortable. If you can prove Jesus rose from the dead, there's an intellectual assent to that fact, or there is a resistance to that fact. But whether there's an assent or a resistance is often fueled by what will it cost me to assent to it. And if I assent to it, will I actually believe it and make it a big part of my life? Because that will affect a lot of things too. I know plenty of people who have said, yeah, what you're saying is probably true, but I'm not going to make it a part of my life because there's going to be consequences. So we have to expose that. Expose that. That is a powerful incentive to not be open-minded to what the gospel has to offer. But the second thing we can do is offer community. There's a lot we can do, but offer community. Rodney Stark points out in The Triumph of Christianity that Christianity didn't just spread because the message was beautiful, powerful, and true. Oftentimes people converted because there was a community to convert to. Because you lose community. And when there's a place for you to go, it becomes a little easier for you to carefully consider the claims being made by that community. So what we can also do is offer these people who might lose a lot that we can never replace what you've lost 100%, but we can approximate that. And then what you gain in terms of what the gospel has to offer you in terms of eternal life and the relationship you can have with Christ. And if we live that in our lives and live like we actually mean it, that will become attractive.
Yeah.
So we can have the intellectual conversation while addressing the existential crisis they're going to be going through, one with apologetics, the other one with community.
Yeah, and I think, one of the other things that we talk about a lot is the idea that you don't answer worldviews, but you answer people. So
Yes.
when someone does come to you, you don't say, oh, you're Jewish, therefore I know what you believe. Let me go look up what Jews believe, and then I'll do that. This happened to me once with a friend of mine who was Hindu, and I thought, well, I know what Hinduism is. I've read about it in world religion texts. And I go to him and I find out, oh, there's this other kind of Hindu. He was the kind that was kind of like, I don't necessarily believe it all, but it's philosophical. And so we still have, the idols. We still have these figures in our house. His wife was kind of more what you would call a true believer. So, I had a conversation with him about morality and this kind of stuff. And it was just very interesting that it was more like talking to a secular humanist than it was. And actually one who was kind of sad about it. I remember he mentioned something interesting, which was a great entryway into more conversations, was he was talking about his lack of, because he just admitted there is, for him, as an atheist, he can't affirm that there's anything like objective morality, even though he wants there to be, because he would hate for something terrible to happen to his mother. But he said, I know that that's just my personal feeling, but ultimately there's nothing technically wrong if something, quote unquote, evil happened to her, because evil doesn't exist. It's not even a negation. It's nothing. Because there's no good. And if there's no good, there's no evil. And he said, but I wouldn't want other people to agree with me on that. And so,
That's fascinating.
So but getting to know the actual person opens up these conversations, and you end up, I think, typically having way more entry points to talking about the gospel, because you find out actually there's some sense of, like Augustine said, there's some sense within them still that's good, and they want goodness, and they see the problems with the world, and they care about them, but there's all this other stuff that's happened that's kind of clouded their minds or whatever. But it may not just be, let me talk to you about polytheism. That was nothing to them.
I mean, without going into detail about it because of time, but I had a conversation with a Muslim at his house years ago. A friend of mine invited me, and we were going to talk about the evidence for the resurrection. Well, within a few minutes of being in the house, I discovered that this guy is, while he would say he's a Muslim, and I would actually say that he probably was authentically a Muslim, he very much bordered on agnostic, because he had a hard time with the suffering and evil in the world and a God who was all good. Most Muslims would never express that kind of doubt. They'd say, look, I don't understand why suffering exists, but I don't question God. This guy did. And that's usually not what most Muslims will do. Now, he did. So I have to address the question he's actually asking, not the one I actually want him to ask. The point is that Muslims are different. They're different in many subtle ways. You're answering people, not questions. And while they might adhere to the core tenets of Islam and all these kind of things, there are different sects of Islam within the pale of the Orthodox Islam. There are some Muslims who would say they're Muslims and they have a belief that's so out of the pale that they consider heretics by most Muslims.
Yeah.
And there are people who are culturally Muslims at best. There are Jews that way. There are Christians that way. There are atheists who are different kinds of atheists. There are strict materialists. There are people who are emergentists. There are all kind of people. Well, what are they going through? And so I'm a big student of asking questions. Just like, there's universities all over this world. You go to a university in Central America and South America, you're going to have a different experience than if you went in North America or Asia or Africa. You're going to be a different experience. You might learn the same exact thing, but you're going to have a different cultural experience there. So I think it's important to get to become familiar with the person you're trying to talk to, get to know them as a person, because you're going to find out that there's inroads to the gospel that are particular to the person, not particular to their worldview, writ large. But their personal worldview, there's always an inroad.
Yeah. Now, with that, I'm assuming this person that asked is a woman, only because I've noticed men. Well, there's whatever that is. That might be a name. I don't know. I don't know if it's standing for something else, but it could be a name. I don't know that I know Valerie, but I was only saying that because I've noticed that men tend to ask like questions for themselves. Women tend to really care a lot about their kids,
Oh, that's funny.
More than so. Good on you for caring about your kids here. But this person asked about how to prepare kids as well.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned a couple resources, Mama Bear Apologetics.
Hilary Morgan Farrer's got great stuff. Yeah. Great stuff. And it's continuing to develop where you can not only prepare your kids and inoculate them in a way for what's coming. And by the way, secluding them in Christian schools and Christian daycare and homeschooling won't do it, because the stuff that's challenging their faith is going to show up on whatever device they happen to use. Just go and look up anything on Christianity in YouTube, and after a while, the "you might like" section of the YouTube thing will include people who object to your faith.
Yeah.
So you can't avoid it.
Yeah, and you said something one time too at an event that struck me, which was, you said, it's the same thing. You don't answer questions, you answer people. You do need to answer the things that your children are actually asking. They need to know the answer. And it's not just some abstract question. It's this person who's really searching or struggling with something. And you said they will find answers somewhere.
Yeah.
So you need to be the one. Even if you don't know, find someone who knows, get a book. And I think a good example of that kind of relationship you can have is also a book written by some friends of ours called Faith That Lasts by Stuart and Cameron McAllister, which is a good resource on.
Yeah, terrific book.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. Cameron went through some lows in terms of his devotion to his faith, and Stuart, his dad, had to wrestle with, how do I shepherd this situation through? So I highly recommend it. And Cameron is just a good friend of ours, and he's just a wonderful guy, thoughtful as you can get as well.
Well, and that book started because people kept coming up to them as experts in Christianity and saying, "Fix my kids," and they were saying, It's gonna be a lot better if it comes from you.
Yeah,
I know it doesn't seem like that, but you need to be hands-on on this,
right?
And
no, absolutely,
you can do a lot yourself.
Well, one of the things that we mentioned questions is that what we do with our kids, and this is no guarantee, by the way, but it does help, is to make sure that they can ask their questions freely and understand that you won't meet their questions, no matter how shocking the question might be, with judgment. Now you can be screaming on the inside, thinking, "Oh my goodness, what's going on? What's going on here?" But remember, respond to them with kindness, compassion, and care, and understanding that they're asking you a question. They're doing you a great honor of saying, "You're somebody who I trust with this. I want to ask you this question." And then even if you don't have the answer, say, I need to go find out. But give them the freedom to ask any question, no question off limits. Also, teach them critical thinking. My kids and I were playing a game early on called Spot the Truth, Spot the Lie. We'd watch television, or we'd engage in some kind of pop culture, media of some kind. And we had a game we play occasionally, not every single time, because sometimes that can get a little heavy-handed. But it was Spot the Truth, Spot the Lie. Originally it was spot the lie, but then what happens is kids become cynical. Everything's a lie and everyone's lying to you all the time, and there's no way to live. But spot the truth in what someone's saying and spot the lie, even when there is a subtle agenda to it. And you can do this even with these reality shows where there's a singing competition. There's truth and lie in what's happening in the middle of that. Everyone's got an agenda of some kind whenever they present any kind of media. For human beings, we have agendas. That's what we do. We have opinions, and we express them through our art or through whatever else it might be. So teach the kids how to actually figure out what's true and what's false in what they're reading, whether it's overt, it's a statement that's true or false, or it's messaging that's subtle in the way it's packaged. So I think getting them critical thinking skills early is incredibly important. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
One of the things,
Chesterton? Okay.
I was going to say, one of the things to help the kids as well is don't bog them down. Resist the urge to bog them down in so much apologetics material that they lose their sense of awe and their sense of beauty about the world. Now, apologetics done right will increase your sense of awe about what's going on. But sometimes when we just jam propositional truths down someone's throat, or can you recite the Kalam cosmological argument to me and see if they remember it, that's great, but it can't substitute our sense of awe. Singing and reading hymns, old hymns, they're written so beautifully. Some of the theological richnesses are so important. But I also think that getting kids this sense of awe early would be great. Our good friend Zandra Carroll, who worked with Ken Boa on the Museum of Created Beauty, which is an online museum where you look at nature and they see from flora and fauna, from plants and animals, the way in which the design of the biological world is so intricate, but also is intricate in a way that's quite beautiful and magnificent, will increase their sense of awe of what's around them, from microscopic to the macro animals as well.
Well, they've already published and are in the process, I believe, of publishing more even books based on that as well.
Yes, indeed. In fact, I think our friend Zandra has got a book that she just did a book signing for, and it's doing really well. So I'm very, very happy for her. So Zandra, shout out to you. But this comes down to this wonderful quote from G.K. Chesterton in a book called Orthodoxy, which is a beautiful book. You all should read it if you haven't already, about children and how they encounter the world. He says, because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free. Therefore, they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again. And the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. I can tell you as a dad, that's true. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never got tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy, for we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. The repetition in nature may not be a mere recurrence. It may be a theatrical encore. Boy, that's awesome. And sometimes when you write books, you wish you write like some people, and that's just the kind of thing that's amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well, Abdu, Chesterton and that quote specifically is a great place to stop.
Yeah.
For this sort of, there's going to be a few more episodes where we're answering questions, but this first installment of 2 episodes, what are your closing arguments? To recap, we've talked about Zoroastrianism. We talked about Islam. We talked about the nature of evil. We've talked about cross-cultural ministry and what it takes with cultures and how to help children. What are some of your closing arguments now based on a lot of that?
Well, I think that the important thing to take away from this, especially the last question we answered, the way to wrap this whole thing up with that beautiful quote from Chesterton, is we do delight in the monotony in the sense that we ask questions. And we keep asking questions. Some of these questions have been asked a lot, over and over again, over the course of decades, even though they've been answered and or debunked based on the objections they are. But we delight in asking questions. And the key is to delight in getting the answers and then taking them in. And then I would say, as a result of the answers you've heard. Wrestle with these things, but don't forget to be inspired and awed by the truths that are inherent in the Christian faith. Don't take the things that that we say as merely academic interest. Go look for yourself. Go find out if these things are true. Don't worry when the objections come that this and this is parallel to this, and therefore Christianity is this myth. Examine your heart. Why do those objections bother you? Why do these answers help you, if they do help? And recapture that sense of wonder, recapture that sense of awe, because I think that sense of awe will sustain us. And we'll talk about emotions in the next episode, and their role. And I'm really looking forward to that answer, actually, because I think it dovetails well with this whole idea of how do you prepare yourself, not only your kids, but prepare yourself for what's to come in terms of the objections to your faith, in terms of the opportunities you have to spread your faith. And I think it's that healthy balance of awe and intellect, of what you know and what you experience, that makes the Christian life such a rich experience as well. So that's what I have to say. Until next time, friends, the defense rests.